Good morning, everyone. Welcome to How Hospitality Brands Can Win in a Digital World, a reputation webinar brought to you in partnership with CGA. My name is Paul Modley, and I'm the Digital Marketing Coordinator here at Reputation. My role today is to manage the technical aspects of the webinar, introduce the panel, and run through a few housekeeping items. Karl Chessel joins us from CGA, where he has worked as a partner and consultant for more than 20 years. Karl is very passionate about eating and drinking out, and his team work closely with leading pub, bar and restaurant operators and food service companies to provide deep insight on the hospitality sector. Moving on to my colleague Phil. Phil Capper is a highly experienced account executive who's been at Reputation for 3 years. During this time, Phil has helped numerous hospitality enterprises to enhance their online reputation and customer experience. And last but not least, my colleague Kate. Kate Burns is Reputation's engagement manager. Kate has been an integral part of the team for 3 years, progressing from customer success manager to engagement manager, where she now manages complex projects for leading hospitality brands such as Stonegate and Mitchells and Butler. And without further ado, I'm going to hand you over to Karl.
Thanks, Paul. Good morning, everybody. As you see from the agenda, I'm going to cover the first point, really, which is about kind of where we are from a market perspective and some of the key findings of the report that we've done for Reputation. So we surveyed around 2,000 consumers. It's a GB representative sample. And as Paul alluded to, at CGA, we were all about data and insight. So we're constantly surveying consumers to really understand what's going on in the sector. And in this particular instance, we were asked to really get under the skin of the online customer journey, some of the digital touch points, and obviously very much from a reputation perspective. And Phil and Kate later will talk about how this research can really be taken forward to understand and make a real positive impression for your reputation. I thought it worth just starting with a bit of scene setting. So we survey a lot of consumers. We also survey a lot of business leaders as well. So on a quarterly basis, we speak to around 200 senior leaders in the sector, multi-site operators and very much C-suite. And I thought this was interesting just to sort of set the scene in terms of sentiment, but also attitudes to tech, to data, to insight that have really shifted during the pandemic. From a sentiment perspective, I won't take you through all of this slide. There's 2 lines on here. So one is confidence in own business, and the other is confidence in the sector. Generally, the confidence in the own business is a little bit higher, but they follow a fairly similar pattern. And therefore, in the kind of depths of the pandemic in 2020, confidence and sentiment was pretty much on the floor. We have, though, seen a really nice pickup. We actually got to a point in the reopening phase where everyone was a bit giddy, and actually optimism was higher than it'd been for around 6 years. That's dipped a little bit, but generally the market is doing remarkably well. Sales are growing, the consumer demand is there. We're not going to recover, unfortunately, the lost revenue that we've had, but people are looking forward with a 12-month horizon and are reasonably confident about the sector and their business as a whole. And in terms of tech, and tech's a pretty broad church. It covers technology in its own right. It also covers kind of data, insight, digital. Generally, businesses have found it really, really useful since reopening. So 9 out of 10 leaders are telling us businesses that it's been critical to their business since reopening. And this is a real step change, actually, because historically when we've asked this, as I say, we ask these sort of questions on a quarterly basis. Tech has been the one area that people have felt are behind the curve. And we've asked them how they feel they compare to the market and their peers. They've generally said they feel a little bit behind, and that ultimately it's an area they could improve. They found it, whether it's head office, back of house, front of house, how that tech talks to each other, they found it a challenge. But actually, they've been forced through the pandemic to embrace tech, to embrace data, and to embrace insight. Things like track and trace, obviously, order and pay, and also obviously feeding in to how consumers interact with the venue online. And obviously that builds into reputation, which we'll talk about in the webinar. As you can see, around 1 in 3 saying tech has become essential to their business. A further 40%, it's definitely improved their view of technology. So it's the right time, I think, to be talking about this topic. People are much more willing to engage with tech and data and see the value in it. And you can see 2 in 3 leaders are planning on using and implementing new technology more than pre-pandemic. So it's very much here to stay. As I say, we've seen this step change. Onto the kind of the research itself. I'm going to talk initially about how consumers engage online, and that's both pre and post visit. But just a stat that is sort of outside the research, as I said, we're constantly doing research. We're doing it globally at the moment with consumers looking at sort of post-COVID habits. And you can see from this stat that 46% are likely to plan the visits in much more detail. So again, we've seen operators adopting tech. We've seen the consumer journey changing dramatically, and people are much more thoroughly planning their visits before they go out. Which leads us neatly on to the research that we've conducted. So looking at pre-visit, consumers are generally searching the venue online. They're going to the venue's website to look at, I guess, some of the practical elements. So is it open? Where is it? What menu do they have available? And also people are still, unsurprisingly, obsessed with COVID safety measures as well. So 24% looking at what that venue is doing to reassure them about COVID safety. So I won't take you through all of those, but essentially that the website is still fundamentally important, and it's often a first point of call in that pre-visit journey. As I said, it's very important for reassuring customers on security measures. They'll go to the website and trust what that website is saying that the venue is doing to reassure them and provide a safe environment for them, much more than they will go to something like Google or even phoning the venue. So the website is really, really important for that. And we're obviously still not in a kind of post-COVID environment. So sort of health, safety, security measures are still really, really important in many consumers' minds. And the website is also really, really important, say, for those basics. So just to show how important, you can see 72% of consumers would look for the venue's menu on their website. Nearly a similar number would check the price range on the website. People are looking for open hours. So the website's a really, really important part of the customer journey. But it's clearly not the only one. From understanding about reviews, TripAdvisor is still the place that people go, still number one. Google has been rising, and that's at number two. So 48% looking to TripAdvisor before visiting, 34% looking at Google. The website is still important for that, but people are looking kind of third parties really for that validation of reputation. And when you look at stars, the number 1 and 2 flip. So actually Google, you can see the rise of Google from a star rating perspective. Consumers generally are much more likely to look at that. So 43% looking at Google, 33% at TripAdvisor. But when we're looking at sort of during and after and people writing reviews, again, TripAdvisor absolutely number 1 still at the moment. 45% of consumers looking to write a review afterwards on TripAdvisor. And actually that is interesting from a demographic perspective. There's more detail in the report, and I can't go into it all today. I think it's going to be available to download, but there's a real split around demographics. So older people much more likely to use TripAdvisor to leave a review than younger people. I think the stats are something like if you're 55-year-old plus, you're 78% likely, whereas if you're in the age bracket of 18 to 34, stats are more like around 27%. So a real key difference demographically there. That said, younger people are leaving reviews, and they're really, really important part of that review process. These are the consumers that go out regularly to eat and drink. They're really engaged with the sector. And as you can see there, they're much more likely than average to leave a review. It just isn't necessarily always going to be on TripAdvisor. They're much more adaptive in where they will leave those reviews. But 38% of 18 to 34-year-olds do write reviews. As I say, they're a really important part of the sector. They'll also communicate through their social media accounts, and that age bracket are again 13 percentage points more likely to recommend and listen to their friends and their peers. So 43% of 18 to 34-year-olds recommend a venue to others through their social media accounts. These are obviously trusted people in your network that you'll listen to. So again, just showing how complex the landscape is and how many different digital touch points there are. Obviously, every venue will get some negative reviews at times. It's inevitable, but how you deal with those is really, really important. You can't necessarily turn it around, but if you come out swinging and too defensive, it doesn't work. It's very much about being respectful to the feedback that you're getting. It's also about responding in a timely manner as well. Again, not got the time to go through all the detail, but responding in a timely manner is fundamental. But also responding in a respectful and appropriate way is a way that you can start to remedy any negative feedback that you get. It clearly still needs acting on, of course, and actually I'll come on to it in a second, it doesn't always necessarily drive repeat visit, but it's still an important part of the process. So the next section is on the impact of digital touchpoints on future consumer behaviour. So as we've touched on, high ratings, positive reviews, good presence online, it's quite complex, a lot of different things, but these come up as 1, 2, and 3 in improving a venue's reputation. The responsiveness to negative comments can also improve that reputation, so it comes up as kind of 17% at the bottom there. These are the top 9 out of 14, so I've not shown them all on the chart, but hygiene is actually number 1 at the moment. Again, that might not stay there forever, but it's seen as really important in a venue's reputation. Lots of positive reviews, lots of good star ratings, lots of recent online customer reviews are number 2, 3, and 4. And they're important because they actually drive repeat visits. So these are the factors that do have an impact on whether people are going to come back and whether new people are going to go there. So they're more likely to visit a bar or restaurant if it has that good hygiene rating, if it has those reviews, if it has those good star ratings. As I touched on, legacy reviews doesn't appear in this top 9, which shows that they're important to be dealt with because it's going to turn people off if you don't. But on their own, that doesn't necessarily drive traffic per se. In terms of recency, this is also a key point really. More than 70% of consumer reviews are considered accurate if they were posted no later than 3 months ago. So that's not to say that having a bank of historic reviews isn't important, but there's a kind of old adage that you're only as good as your last service, only as good as your last meal. And you can see that 38% of consumers are only really focusing on reviews in the last month, but the majority of consumers, that 70%, within the 3-month time frame. In relation to frustrations, I've already touched on not responding to negative review constructively. 15% find that really frustrating. But actually the top 3 are fairly basic really. It's just about quality and recency and update of information. So they can't find the information they're looking for on a venue's website. 36% saying that's frustrating. 30% say the information about a venue isn't up to date on Google. So as I say, not things that are necessarily difficult to remedy, but important factors that will really irritate people if you don't get it right. People not responding to queries online is one of my pet peeves, I must admit. And just before I kind of summarise, I think the team at Reputation, Kate and Phil, are going to talk more about how to really drive that reputation. That's obviously what their business is about. But I thought this is really interesting that only 24% of consumers are likely to leave a review without being asked to by the venue. So we do know those people that are engaged with the market, those people that go out regular, will leave reviews. But actually asking them makes a big difference. Something as simple as that. That number shift dramatically to 54%. So 54% of consumers likely to leave a review after being asked to by the venue. So to summarise what I've been through, firstly, that consumers are planning their visits in much more detail than they used to. As I say, operators are in a much more open space to kind of engage with technology, to engage with data, engage with insight, but so are consumers. And they're planning their visits in more detail, and therefore that whole online presence is key. For the website, it's about basics like, is it open, where it is, the menu. Having that up-to-date information is important because otherwise you're really going to irritate people. Many consumers are making decisions based on social media. I'm not going into great detail in that today, but younger people are looking at what their friends, their peers, their influence are telling them. Obviously, they're looking at the imagery and the photographs that go alongside that. So that's an important channel as well, and a growing channel. TripAdvisor and Google, though, are the top platforms. As I say, they flip between 1 and 2, whether it's reviews or whether it's star ratings. But you can see Google on the rise. TripAdvisor is a bit more wedded to that older population, whereas younger people are likely to look at different platforms, including Google. So we're seeing that disparity in age. And in terms of review volume, it's obviously important if you've got lots of reviews, assuming they're good ones. If they are good, then you want them to be really recent, within the last 3 months. And if they're not good, you need to deal with them. You need to make sure that you respond to any negative feedback. It's not necessarily going to make people come back, but if you don't do it, it will definitely make people turn off and not come back. So that was my summary. As I said, there's a lot of touch points and a lot of complexity, I think, to this. But that whole customer journey has changed. It has definitely stepped up and people are looking at lots and lots of different platforms to kind of make sense of where they go, what they do within the venue, and then what they do post-visit. So I'm going to hand over to Phil now for the next section.
Thanks, Karl. I appreciate that. Some really interesting stats there. So just to quickly cover that, Karl did mention that the detailed report will be available to download post this event. So feel free to download that and give it a good read. I'm sure it'll be quite interesting for a lot of you out there. Today, I just want to talk about the impact of reputation on consumers' choices and CX trends that we're seeing today, really. If you consider the new customer journey, we'll see this ourselves as consumers. The first thing we always do when we're looking for a venue to visit is we reach for our phones or go to our desktop and we'll fire up Google and we'll search for it, whether it's a pub or a restaurant or whatever it may be. So we consider the journey now, we break it down to 3 key areas that we call get found, get chosen, and get better. First and foremost, the first time a consumer is going to experience your brand is the moment when they are searching for you. Of course, we want to optimize that search so you're appearing in those results as much as possible, and that's part of the process in terms of the journey itself. But when you are appearing, are you presenting the right information, the right opening hours, all of the categories and subcategories, all the information to do with your business? Is it being presented in the right way to those consumers when they're finding you? Of course, when they do find you, they will find star averages and ratings on Google, they'll see them on TripAdvisor, Facebook, wherever it may be, and ultimately they will be considering you with a view to hopefully land on one of your pages, hopefully a Google page, and you'll convert them. So they'll click for directions, they may click to call you to book a meal or a table, or indeed click up to go on your website. And again, the information, as Karl mentioned, on your website is equally as important as it is in the public domain to reflect the correct opening hours and the menu choices and all those sorts of things that you'd expect to see as a consumer. All of that experience happens before they've even been to visit you. So it's important to get that right. And that's a priority, really, in this sort of sector that we talk about. Of course, in an ideal world, we've now got a consumer. They've arrived at your doorstep. They've come to experience you as a brand. So it's all about then, making sure they have a great positive experience, making sure that beyond that we are, as Karl mentioned, retaining those customers, asking them to leave feedback. We find that if you don't ask for feedback, the feedback can quite often be negative. As consumers, we're more compelled to shout about a bad experience than we are a good experience. So by tapping into the silent majority that we call it, we're tapping into those happy customers, which means you get a true representation of your brand online and ultimately improving star averages and helping retain those customers and creating that advocacy and ultimately word of mouth. So it's a constant virtuous circle, and by feeding this machine, we're constantly evolving, improving the way we're found online, improving the way we get chosen, and improving the way we get better in the experience that we're giving to our customers. So, it's all about this journey, really. We consider, you go to Google, you're looking for that all-important place to visit. You might be in a specific area or whatever it may be. By managing and controlling the Google listing to begin with, you're positively impacting those search results. So by gathering feedback, by making sure the information is accurate, in completely controlling these environments, we are increasing the chances of being in what's called the local 3-pack. And that is the 3 recommended businesses that Google present to you that sit underneath the map when they present that to you. Of course, once a consumer finds you, they'll ultimately click on your knowledge panel. They'll read a bit about you, no doubt. They'll have a look at some of the feedback that's occurring out there and how you're treating customers and how the service that you're providing. And ultimately, it's about driving people to call you, click the directions, go on the website, and ultimately arrive on site. And everything we do is about optimizing this journey as much as possible to increase footfall and ultimately revenue. And again, it's a constant virtuous circle. So if we consider what Google uses to weight their algorithm in favor of your brand, there are lots of things to consider. But of course, Google is the biggest. Google My Business is the biggest part of their algorithm. Of course, it's their product. So they like you to be seen, to be taking an active role in managing your Google My Business knowledge panels. Whether it's constantly posting things about COVID-related issues, the way you're dealing with COVID, updating business hours, of course. Heaven forbid we have to close again, but making sure you're reactive and closing and updating those Google My Business categories, all those sorts of information is of paramount importance. And we always advocate update it even if it hasn't changed. Google like to see recency, they like to see you taking an active role, and by controlling that, they will ultimately rank you higher in those search results. Beyond that, it's your on-page information. So if that doesn't reflect what's on Google My Business, Google will spot that when they send their spiders out, and they'll see conflicts in the data and the information between the two, and therefore downweight you. So getting that consistency is important. Beyond that, it's things like citations. So again, Google do compare how the information stored on Google compares to the likes of Bing, Facebook, Apple, all these different sources. So keeping it consistent everywhere is equally as important. And of course, beyond that, the second biggest part of the algorithm is the reviews. Not just are you getting reviews, but are you getting them regularly? Are they positive? Are you engaging with them? And I don't mean just negative reviews. It's also good to respond to positive reviews as well during this process. But all of that has a big influence in that search result, and ultimately drives up footfall by controlling these environments as much as possible. So we've seen, with some of our experiences with our clients, that regularly updating the business profiles has seen increases of 500% in terms of the views across maps and search. So you're considered to be 2.7 times more reputable if you're managing these environments. We see huge increases in direction requests if you start posting photos. Or taking an active role in these environments does see significant increases, in something that you should absolutely be considering as part of your ongoing CX and digital strategy. And of course, making sure that the correct phone numbers are on there, all of that information makes a big impact in terms of the conversion rates that you expect to see online. So what makes up a brand's reputation? Well, it's a function of multiple things, and what we try and do is break down the barriers between these two things. Of course, through your own advertising and communications, you have your brand promise, what you are saying you will deliver, versus what the customers are saying, the experience they've had with you via social, via review channels, and of course word of mouth, through to the actual experience that they have when they walk through your door and come and dine with you, for example. And again, we try and break down the barriers of all this to make sure that you are consistent across the board, consistent between what you are promising the customer and what you're delivering at the end game. And it's all about managing this environment as much as possible to increase that brand advocacy, that customer experience, and ultimately that word of mouth to drive more and more customers. So I'll hand over to my colleague Kate now. She's going to take you through how to create and protect a positive online impression. Kate, over to you.
Thanks, Phil. So yeah, lots of amazing, insightful information from Karl and Phil. But what we really wanted was to leave you with our key 5 takeaways from today. So to break it down really simply to you. So our top 5 tips on how to create and protect a positive online impression. We'll go through each one on screen, and then we'll take a deeper dive into each one and showcase the positive impact our customers at Reputation have had by taking action in each of these areas. So top tip 1, it's important to claim your GMB, your Google My Business profile, and make sure your information is up to date and accurate. 2, important to request reviews. 3, really important to listen to that feedback and respond to your customer reviews. 4, engage on social media. And 5, really important to close the loop with guest complaints. So let's take a deeper dive into your Google My Business panel. So what we can see on screen right now to the left-hand side is an unmanaged GMB profile, versus to the right-hand side is an actively managed GMB profile from a Reputation customer. If you look at the unmanaged listing, you can see even if they've given good customer experience, it doesn't matter because they're not showcasing it. There's no reviews and there's not a lot of imagery. They're really not using Google to its full capabilities. What we can see to the right-hand side is the Albert is basically got 5-star reviews, 1,500 reviews over on their listing. You can see how they are using all the other key functions of GMB to add their menu information, photos and videos. So they are actively engaging in using their GMB profile to drive more traffic to their location. And what we can actually what we actively know is that the GMB profile will drive 10 times more traffic than their own website. Okay, so leading nicely into another case study from a reputation customer. So, you know, GMB is the new front door to your business, and actually making the new front door work for you. So what we can see here is this is a customer that we started working with back in 2017. And so by them actively taking action and managing their GMB profile, we've seen by the end of 2019, the gains from views, calls and clicks to websites driven from their GMB page. Again, it got 10 times more visits than their own website. Okay, as Phil and Karl have already touched on, so important to request reviews. And the CGA report actually showcased that 54% of consumers are likely to leave a review after being asked to do so. So here at Reputation, we make it really easy for customers to share their feedback. We work with our customers to actually understand their customer journey and work with them on technical integrations to actually, you know, drive reviews and survey feedback as well from, you know, bookings information or customer information when they've logged onto their Wi-Fi. But ultimately, at Reputation, we've actually got a technical partnership with both Google and TripAdvisor, which allows us to push zero friction sharing. So what this basically means in simple terms is customer completes a survey. At the end of the survey, there's no need for them to retype their information based on their average star rating and their feedback. We basically transpose that information across into their Google review or TripAdvisor review for them to simply click and then share on each of those key source sites. And the next slide actually shows the positive impact of one of our key customers. So what we can see here is when we actually introduced Review Booster, the positive impact that had on review volume in a short period of time. And the great news story here is that this customer could actually correlate an increase in reviews and average star rating with an increase in revenue as well. Okay, as Karl mentioned from the CGA report, it's so important to respond to customer reviews. Our advice is that you need to prioritise and respond to 100% of your negative reviews, and at least an absolute minimum 20% of your positive reviews. So you should be using your positive reviews as an opportunity to encourage repeat service and satisfaction, but use your negative reviews as an opportunity to de-escalate an issue. Invite the reviewer to move their conversation offline. We don't want you airing your dirty laundry online. Important to respond professionally and direct the customer offline to a customer service team or a location manager. Great thing about the Reputation platform is we have built-in templates that we call macros that allow businesses at scale to respond really professionally to positive and negative reviews at speed. So key stat and key takeaway here, just to re-emphasize, is that 78% of consumers say that seeing management respond to online reviews actually makes them believe that the business cares more about them. So really, really emphasizing you need to take action and respond to your customer feedback. Okay, point 4 is social media. So the customer journey starts on social and is heavily influenced by your CX delivery. So your marketing teams will use social media to engage locally, but your CX teams can use social media to optimize the CX strategy at scale. So the Reputation platform gives one tool to help increase demand and engagement, improve sentiment experience, but Phil spoke about crisis and brand management earlier, and this is how social media helps you manage this at scale. So you really need to think about, what you're posting on social media, whether you're posting images of food, videos, etc. But also another key point on social media is actually setting up keyword alerts so that you can react instantly, rather than letting something go viral. So if the customer posts something about food poisoning, and you set a keyword alert, which you've got the capability to do on the reputation platform, it means you can obviously, manage a crisis that might actually potentially go viral. Okay, and our final point is taking action on customer feedback. So this is where we talk about closing the loop on your customer or your customer feedback. So reputation is one central hub which lets you manage your feedback from anywhere. So as we can see to the left-hand side, there's feedback coming from everywhere. So it could be from third-party reviews, it could be surveys, and it could be social media. So how do you actually manage this at scale? And this is why it's in technology is really important. So the reputation platform brings all this feedback in, and then we make it really simple for you to understand your customer feedback, understand what you are doing well, but also understand really simply where you might need to make operational improvement. So one of the key functionalities of reputation is our experience insight module. So this is where we help you manage your customer feedback by making it simple to actually listen to what your customers are saying based on key categories. So this is a really great example on screen now of how we helped one of our customers. So the sentiment chart on screen at the moment, as you can see, red flag alert, waiting time was provided, negative sentiment. So, the bigger the box, the more feedback is being related to this particular category. So this customer knew it was a real key concern for them. So by using this functionality, they were able to really drill down into what their customers were saying about this wait time category in order to really identify what they needed to do to make improvements. And what we could see is 3 months later, they had actually started to obviously make that operational change, and they were already driving positive feedback. So really listened to the customers, made operational change, which has, as you can see, actually delighted their customers and resulted in more positive feedback. Okay, and this is another example of one of our key customers. So, again, just to really emphasize how closing the loop really does make a positive impact. What we can see is a customer review had a bad experience and left a 2-star rating. But ultimately, how the Harvester brand actually managed this actually resulted in the customer going back on literally not long after in order to change their rating to a 5-star review and obviously more positive feedback. So really emphasizing the positive change you can make by really engaging with your customer reviews and closing the loop.
So thanks, Kate. So just to conclude, I just want to talk about Google, really. We talk about Google a lot, but that's mainly because I think they own about 96% of search traffic here in the UK. It's important that we do manage this environment as much as possible. There's sort of 4 key areas on Google if you consider we look at it every day but don't really think about it too much. First and foremost, we see AdWords that appear on the top, and then we see sort of landing pages, which is ultimately your organic pages for your individual locations. And of course, we see third-party review sites and social pages that appear in that search result. And of course, that all-important Google My Business Knowledge panel on the right-hand side. So we consider AdWords to begin with. There are things called Google Seller Ratings. It enables us to create star ratings that we can apply to your AdWords, which we see when we know increases conversions. Beyond that, of course, is the organic landing page. So making sure that the pages are optimized for organic search and the information is equally consistent with the Google My Business Knowledge panel will have an influence on how you appear in that organic search. Of course, below that, you'll see the TripAdvisor of the world, the Facebooks of this world appearing in there with ratings. So again, making sure that you're managing the sentiment and the star ratings and the review responses on those environments is just as important as Google. And then as we flip over to the Google My Business Knowledge panel on the right-hand side, of course, making sure that the information on there is accurate, consistent, the correct opening hours. We're making use of every single functionality on there, whether it's menus, making sure the web links are right, the telephone numbers are correct, the map details are right, and of course uploading lots of nice imagery that's been pre-approved by you, as opposed to just leaving customers to load images, has a positive impact. And all of this can be managed through the reputation platform. One thing we haven't touched on today is what we call reputation score. So reputation score is a single boiled down measure that we use to look at how you are publicly perceived in the local community. I won't talk about it too much today because I haven't got much time, but it's used by many of our clients to very easily and quickly measure how they're performing at a local level. Of course, local means it rolls up through to regions and of course brand level, but it's just a good and consistent way to understand how you're performing at a local level. And it's a constant living, breathing metric that increases and decreases over time, depending on the experience that you're giving to your customers. So I'll hand over to Paul now to run a quick Q&A. Hopefully we've had a few questions asked, and we look forward to answering any questions.
Thank you, Phil, and thank you also to Karl and Kate. A really exciting presentation. Yeah, we have had some questions, and we're going to start with a great one from John. I think this might be a good one for you to take, Phil. It's about, have you experienced a correlation between improved reputation and revenue?
All the time. As I mentioned just back a slide when we talk about the reputation score, the more we engage with consumers in these environments and the more we ask for feedback, the increased ratings that we see, and it's not just on Google, we talk about Google a lot, but by managing these environments consistently everywhere, it means you improve star ratings. It means people are more likely to trust you and ultimately arrive at site. So there is always a constant and correlation, if you like, between reputation and footfall and ultimately revenue, of course.
Thank you, Phil. I've got another question here from Emma. This one is, what key metrics should we track as part of our reputation management processes? Kate, perhaps you'd like to take that one?
Yeah, of course. So there's actually 9 key areas that make up reputation score, and that we could advise that if you are managing each of these 9 key areas actively, that you will rank high in search results, etc. So the top 3 that have the heaviest weighting towards your reputation score and your online reputation visibility are your average star rating, review volume, and review recency. So all work hand in hand. So ultimately we want you to be providing great customer experience. If you provide great customer experience, you're going to encourage customers to go on and leave a review. And as Karl mentioned earlier, obviously the CGA results themselves actually showcase that consumers are actually mainly interested in reviews 3 months and younger. So it is really important to continue to drive reviews in your review volume.
Thanks very much, Kate. More questions still coming through. Please do keep sending them. I've got 2 here that seem quite closely connected. One from Gary and one from an anonymous user. Gary's one is, how do you go about getting reviews? And the other one is, how do companies scale their review response practices? So I think those 2 questions are quite similar. So perhaps we could address them both, either Phil or Kate.
Yeah, I'm happy to take that one. So soliciting reviews is an interesting one. There's multiple ways to do it, really. One, you can simply send an email or an SMS to a customer, directing them to a specific review site and asking them to fill out a review. Or, as Kate briefly mentioned earlier, it's the ability to, using what we call our review booster capability, that private integration we have with Google and TripAdvisor, is taking that feedback first party, asking for it first party, and with the customer's permission, through our private integration, we can push that information directly into either of those 2 environments. To do it at scale, it's all about how you're capturing data, really. We work with many hospitality companies that work and have Wi-Fi, for example, or booking systems in place that allows them to capture that information. And then at a certain point, whether it's post-visit or post-booking, however you want to ask for the feedback, we can trigger those messages out. And it can be done on scale, really, as long as we're integrated to sort of back end, we can trigger those messages out and request that feedback at any point, really.
Thank you very much, Phil. And a question for Kate from Simon. How do you know if you are driving people to your location through Google?
Okay, so on the reputation platform, once we connect to your Google pages, we will, we'll provide you with all the key statistics from your Google My Business listing, and actually showcase to you the calls to actions. So as we've mentioned during the presentation, you will see the number of calls that have been driven by a customer viewing your GMB page and actually taking action to actually call your location, whether to make a booking or to inquire. You will actually also be able to track those customers that have actually requested directions to your location, as well as those customers that have actually gone on to actually visit your website as well. So we give you that capability to actually track the call to action that is driven from Google.
Thanks, Kate. Karl, you're not being left out. We've got a question here specifically for you. In your opinion, the most efficient way to improve experience on premises?
Yeah, good question. I think if you're thinking about in venue, I mean, it comes down to basics really about quality and service. I think are the key, and I think there's some really interesting things that have been talked about today. In terms of using GMB, but actually you still need to get the basics right in venue. And I think what's quite interesting, Kate was talking about like closing the loop. I mean, if you've got keywords, the key themes that keep coming up, such as waiting times, is making sure that you act on them operationally. The sector is very operationally led, so that can be training. It can just be literally changing the way that you adapt your operation to listen to that. So fundamentally, it's about the whole in-venue experience in combination with what you can capture online, that insight you can capture. But ultimately, you have to act on it. You have to train your staff. You have to have good servers who will listen and be empathetic, because not all feedback you'll necessarily capture in other ways. But it's making sure your staff are well trained, your staff are good. And as I said, that those common themes that are coming up, you're dealing with them operationally.
Thanks, Karl. There's a really useful answer for people who are maybe the boots on the ground of the operation, the people who are actually in the restaurants, and as opposed to people who are sort of more leading marketing and CX. But on that note, we've got another question about acting on all pieces of feedback. When it comes to acting on all pieces of feedback, what processes must we have in place to close the loop and improve guest experience? I think I'll let Phil and Kate fight over this one.
Thanks for that, Paul. So how do we close the loop in terms of acting on the feedback? Again, sorry, Kate, I'm interrupting here. The lowest common denominator in our world is always the location and its feedback, and we'll roll that all the way up to head office, however you're operationally structured. Depending on who you are, depends on how you'll view that feedback. Of course, if you're a site manager, the information about your location itself is super important. Of course, if you're a regional manager, the information that was captured about the feedback for all of the locations within your region is important. So we give access to these different users at different levels of the business to be able to act on that feedback at any level, really. And it's that constant being able to drill into that feedback and understand the customer's overall sentiment in those individual categories, such as helping or food or staff behaviour or facilities or whatever it may be, that enables you to act on it at scale or at a local level. We constantly believe that reputation is the responsibility of everyone, whether you're the CEO of a group down to a location manager or even a waiter or waiting staff. It's important that that reputation is at the forefront of everybody's mind, really. I don't know if you want to add to that at all, Kate?
Yeah. So just in addition to that, so worked with many large scale hospitality clients, and as Phil touched on, we've set it up in many different ways, the processes, and we work with our customers to make sure that the configuration of the platform is best fit for them. But yeah, so our functionality allows our customers to track customer feedback, whether it's reviews, whether it's survey feedback, etc., and actually track the responses against an SLA. So you can determine, you want reviews responded to within 48 hours. We're going to empower pub managers because it's really important that they understand their feedback themselves, and so that at operational and head office level, they can actually track, are the reviews actually being responded to, and are they closing the loop within a good time scale? And obviously the CGA report obviously highlighted, actually responding within a good time scale that actually has a positive impact on your customers as well, and their feedback. And we've also set up, survey feedback in relation to head office, customer care teams, guest care teams, actually managing that feedback at scale. And a final point on this is that, we understand that pub managers are very busy. They've got, a busy job to do. So we also have a mobile app, which helps them manage their feedback and their responses on the go as well.
Thank you very much. Seeing as Phil won the fight over the last question, and Kate got to chip in at the end, I'm going to direct this one to Kate, so the kid's more within her expertise. I'd be interested to hear some insight from you on this one as well, Karl. And this is all about what you do to respond to a negative review or negative feedback, whether that's at location or online. Do you think that you have to respond by offering a type of voucher or compensating the customer in some way? Do we think that that's an optimal way of doing things? What do you think, Kate?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. First of all, like we already emphasised, really important that you don't get into an argument first of all with the customer if they've had a negative experience. Even if you don't you don't agree with the feedback at all, it's really important to respond. Take a deep breath, count to 10, and respond professionally. First of all, what we'd say is direct the customer offline. So respond professionally, but always give them an opportunity to be able to take it offline. So whether that's an email, phone number, for whether it's the pub manager themselves or your customer care team. So that would be, the first instance. Obviously, working with some of the major enterprise scale clients, if you get a more specific feedback in relation to surveys, and you've got more feedback from the survey feedback in relation to a bad experience, and you can really correlate, their feedback back to site, and yes, of course, then in those instances, absolutely, I'd be encouraging vouchers to actually try and turn the situation around. Invite the customer back to your location to give them a better experience next time.
Thank you very much, Kate. I'm just mindful that we're running out of time. I just want to use anything you'd like to add to that, Karl.
Not amazing. It's a very comprehensive answer, Kate. I think I'd agree with all of that. I think it's definitely about listening, responding appropriately, and fundamentally acting on it. Not being too defensive about it, taking the heat out of it. I don't necessarily think you have to have a voucher. I think it's more important that customers feel listened to and that their experience is valued. But clearly, a voucher can get them back into the venue. And I think it was Andrew Pound or Andrew Round from Harvester, the example you put up, Kate. It can encourage that repeat visit and then turn that around, and that's something we're wanting to see. So I think it is a mechanism that can be used, but I probably wouldn't necessarily advocate using it every single time.
Definitely, we all love a voucher. Finally, I'd like to thank all of our panelists today. You've done a really great job. And I'd also like to thank everyone who's attended the webinar, because CGA and Reputation, we thrive on our interactions with the audience. And I think looking at our panelists today, they've all really enjoyed themselves. A few follow-up actions for our attendees. The first thing you absolutely must do is download the CGA report. That's available here through BrightTalk and also over at reputation.com. Don't forget to follow CGA and Reputation on LinkedIn, because we'll always be posting insights specific for hospitality industry leaders on those channels. You can also get some great hospitality resources over at reputation.com in the resources section. And if you've got any other questions that haven't been answered today, or you think of something later on, please do send us an email at contact-uk@reputation.com. Finally, once again, thank you very much for attending, and we hope to see you at the next Reputation and CGA webinar in the near future. Thank you.